Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Obviously, we're going to be going through steps for preparing a successful migration to AWS. So you're looking at myself and Lance. We'll go through intros in a second. Again, want to remind everyone to jot down any questions you have, and we'll be sure to answer them towards the end. And if you stick with us to the end, we've got a special migration offer for you. So I'll kick us off. My name is Scott Goldberg. I lead our solutions architect team here at Mission. A little bit about me. I am a cloud architect by trade. So I've been working in and around AWS and cloud for over 8 years now. Worked through countless migrations for folks, various greenfield builds, anything that you need. We've probably done. I would say I'm an automator, so anything that has to be done more than once, maybe twice, should be automated, and that both goes for I think my business work and life as well as at home, which sort of dovetails into I would say like I love everything smart home related. So automating things, lights, thermostats, the whole bit. And I'm into 3D printing as well. So if you guys have any similar interests, you can look me up on LinkedIn. Happy to chat about it. But we also have Lance.
Hey there, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lance. I'm a solutions architect here at Mission. I kind of came up in the industry as a typical IT guy turned sysadmin, turned cloud sysadmin to now like software developer. Just been kind of working on not only AWS systems for a while, but just systems in general, between Linux and Windows administration, just running servers has always been a part-time hobby and part-time passion. Just a fun thing to do, and you can manage a whole fleet of things and like issue orders to a bunch of little bots that you control with scripts and whatnot. So outside of tech, I like to cook, spend a lot of time outside. I like just being in the sunlight and doing things like camping and surfing and skateboarding. Um, yeah, and so I talk engineering and architecture stuff for our customers here at Mission during kind of our pre-sales processes together. That's it from me. Kick it back to you, Scott.
All right, so I'm gonna kick us off with a little bit about Mission, who we are, what we have to offer, and just sort of like setting the stage for migrations and why and who and those types of things, and then I will pass it over to Lance, and he's going to talk a little bit about sort of like Mission and AWS's process, the migration acceleration program, and various sort of like drivers and how-tos and do's and don'ts for migrating to the cloud and AWS specifically, and then we'll sort of summarize, wrap up, and that's it. Should be short and sweet for you all. So thanks again for joining, and I'm gonna get rolling. So I want to start off with a little bit of info on who Mission is. So we're a premier consulting partner and managed services provider. And so what does that mean that we do? Well, as a partner to AWS, we offer a comprehensive set of services that really span the entire customer cloud journey. So from the architecture phase, when you're trying to find out if you're ready for a migration to the cloud, and even if you're already there, sort of what should you be working on and doing next, through the actual migrations themselves. So we've done many migrations to AWS, helped lots of customers getting where they are, from where they are into the cloud and AWS specifically. And then once you're in the cloud, we can help by managing your environments for you. So from a 24/7 monitoring and alert response to continuous security to DevOps consulting, it's likely that we have a service for you. And finally, sort of the most important thing for anyone on AWS is to make sure that you're optimizing on the platform. So we help customers continually evaluate their environments, both helping from a cost perspective, to also ensuring that your infrastructure is sort of sized appropriately, that your dollars are at the very least being spent in the most appropriate way. So like I said before, Mission's a premier consulting partner, which is the highest tier that you can be with AWS. So it takes a lot of effort to get that certification, and we're really excited to be one of the few. You could see in this list that we have a number of different AWS competencies as well. So that means we've been thoroughly vetted by AWS in all of these areas. There's a number of case studies that we have to show, customer testimonials, and a certain number of complete projects that we get audited for to sort of, prove these out. And so we also have competencies in a few different verticals, including healthcare, life sciences, and SaaS, and then some newly acquired ones that we have in orange in the data and analytics space. So these just show you sort of the type of work that we're well versed in. Obviously, there are lots of things that we do for customers and other verticals that we work in that either don't have a competency designation, or we just haven't gotten around to applying for it yet. But feel free to sort of let us know any and all projects that you all might have, or things that you want to pick our brains on, and that's sort of what Lance and I are here for. We're always happy to at least have a conversation. So I wanted to talk quick about some of Mission's most recent stats. So we have over 260 employees now, with over 100 AWS certified engineers across our technical team. So since the pandemic, we've been 100% remote. So now we have coast to coast coverage, and obviously everywhere in between. We aim to be an extension of your team. So I'll say, we're there where and when you need us, and we move at your pace or faster. And offer a number of services that allow you to focus on what it is that you do and that your business is excellent at, without getting dragged down by sort of the ongoing infrastructure management and things like that. I do want to say that we're also AWS only, so it's all we do. So when you bring your AWS migrations and projects to us, you can definitely count on us to know what we're doing in regards to the platform. So why migrate, right? We'll go through some of the key benefits and advantages for doing so. I guess I want to start by saying there are a number of reasons why you might want to migrate your IT environment to AWS. And so the few of the most important benefits include, what you see on the left here. So improved agility. So with elastic scaling, containers, and a diverse range of platforms on the platform on AWS, companies can achieve increased agility, definitely without sacrificing performance. So there's tons and tons and tons of different AWS services, and they all mesh together really, really well. So that's something that you should be looking at as you're kind of planning a migration, or where you should take your infrastructure. Is sort of like seeing which services exist that will help you sort of be less needed involved in the sort of day-to-day running of them, and let somebody else kind of take over that. There's better cost efficiency. So optimizing spend and governance in AWS is easily accessible and can really help you achieve powerful savings. Again, this is an area where a partner can help, but AWS has tons and tons of functionality baked in to help you visualize, where your dollars are being spent, how to optimize your instances, both from a sizing and storage perspective, but also help you kind of expand horizontally, so you're not over provisioned like you might be used to at sort of the data center side of things. You can get to faster deployment and development. So building out CI/CD pipelines using AWS native services, or some of their integrations will definitely shorten development cycles, reduce time to launch. There are tons and tons of tools, and now there are so many different languages that you can write your automation in, that sort of not using all of this stuff there's not a whole lot of excuses anymore, because they make it so easy for you and especially your developers to pick up in a language that they know and understand. And then from a longevity perspective, obviously, as your company grows, AWS could certainly accommodate your evolving needs, scales, priorities, et cetera, as they're probably growing fastest of all. So again, I mentioned at the beginning of this slide, services are probably almost doubling, or at least it feels that way year over year. And there's absolutely going to be a new service for something that you can't do today, tomorrow. And certainly a large amount of improvements and building upon the services that they have today. And you can see on the right, there's just a number of additional quantifiable benefits too, including ones that'll definitely make your finance and your security teams excited. So as we've enabled hundreds of migrations to AWS, a number of different patterns have emerged, from a decision-making perspective and drivers for obviously like moving to the cloud. And AWS has this slide that I wanted to include here because it really reflects the business drivers. I would say, this is more built out towards your sort of larger businesses, even enterprise companies, but there's 4 kind of discernible decision patterns that we've seen. And even though you might not have dedicated owners for these various work streams, it might actually be one person that owns all of these work streams. They're still kind of absolutely pertinent when it comes to startups and the future of your infrastructure and even, sort of business goals in general. And the collective, we Mission AWS, we understand life as a startup. We know that you're kind of looking to first launch and drive traction to your business, whatever that might be, and then sort of the next phase from there is scaling to meet demand. And like I think I mentioned on the last slide, don't need to belabor it. There's tons and tons of services and ways to go about making sure that you can be enabled on both of those sides. So in the top left section here, your kind of traditional CIO decision maker. This person's usually in charge of the decision to either develop in-house, like refactor your applications, or or even around like building out new apps if they're greenfield, or prioritize the use of like SaaS apps, right? So what's in the marketplace? Let's not reinvent the wheel here. And it's kind of important to understand where and how you want your applications to end up. So taking the time to kind of view your apps, where they stand, where they need to end up, and who's going to be working on them is definitely something to first and foremost kind of get under your belt. Second is really whoever runs security at your organization, right? So the build out or transformation of apps kind of in that previous step will definitely drive your security strategy to a cloud first model, right? So that means kind of a complete revisit on those sort of older on-prem approaches and tactics to security, moving away from hardware appliances, firewalls that you have plugged in your office because that's where you started building this thing out a number of years ago, right? And moving to a cloud model that both uses AWS accounts and organizations and sort of like those built-in security structures that AWS has in place, but then also potentially working with like ISVs or other marketplace SaaS companies who kind of deliver virtual firewalls and different things like managed WAFs and things like that you can implement as they're going to be the market leaders. Third is really whoever owns your company's data. So they're receiving data streams like never before. The art of the possible in the cloud is so much more flexible and scalable compared to on-prem that we see lots of companies make data their second driver for use of AWS kind of after developer productivity. So really kind of getting a handle on what does your data look like? What's the business model for collecting it, storing it, using it? And then kind of using that to sort of better drive decisions as to where things need to end up will help you kind of drive a more of a cohesive migration picture. Finally, ops, right? So ops has to go through substantial process and people skill changes, right? If you don't have experience or you weren't kind of born in the cloud, and you're here because you want us to talk about where to get you to kind of application 2.0, your team has experience on the data center model, right? And so as this team has to adopt new cloud first tools and sort of and applications, and again tools around serverless containers and SaaS, et cetera, this team is kind of going to start modernizing their software tooling, but also going to be under pressure to reduce costs while also being more agile. So I think like enablement of your teams, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute here, is super important when kind of starting a migration endeavor. So here, right, I guess what are the ingredients for a successful migration? So the first is really culture. Culture is going to play like the biggest part in kind of looking for a successful migration. Your team needs to be aligned around the why you're looking to migrate, and that's from both, like senior level executive side of things, but also your engineers, right? The folks who are kind of working through day in, day out management of your infrastructure and applications. And really just making sure everyone understands like why we are doing this, getting everyone rallied around potential cost savings, increased team agility, right? Ability to experiment and build a differentiating product faster than one of your competitors, giving your teams access to sandbox. So again, so they can go and spend some money and mess around, but without breaking the bank. I think getting everyone aligned around the benefits as they might relate to their specific teams is going to be hugely important, and going to make sure that like everyone has meaning in what you're then going to be asking them to do, because pretty much everyone across your organization is going to have a piece of this migration, and whether that's finance teams helping kind of understand the costing, all the way to your builders themselves and how this is going to affect their workflows. So having the why in mind really means that you can push through when you encounter challenges. And so again, understanding that product development might be affected until the migration's complete. So what should your teams be looking out for? What are some of the pitfalls? You're going to have potentially some sort of hybrid workflow for some amount of time. So again, it really just getting everyone bought in will help reduce some of the pain later on. And then knowing the value that will come from the sort of after, right? So having that workload launched on AWS and operationalized and in production, what's the value going to be to individual team members and then the business really as a whole. Second here, to be successful, it's also good to set a timeline. So, there might be an external factor to force the time constraints, such as potentially AWS credits or contracts with your customers or licenses expiring, or you get like audits, etc. But by having aggressive time constraints, your team can move faster than it already would, so you can start to get the benefits of AWS sooner. So a lot of that is just kind of identifying what, if any, constraints exist, but then B, setting sort of hard measurable deadlines that folks can get behind, and will really help drive things forward at a pace that I think you'll be happy with. So third, again, I mentioned this before, but really upskilling the team early. So there's lots of resources online for AWS training, certifications. Different third parties have courses that you can work through, but knowing the fundamentals of sort of your cloud and AWS will help with morale, give your team confidence, sort of remove a lot of that guesswork, and allow you to move faster when building on AWS, but then also from an ongoing operations standpoint afterwards. And then fourth, documentation is really key. So allowing you to make repeatable changes to the environment and help your staff stay on top of what worked and what, more importantly, what hasn't, will be incredibly valuable as you sort of cycle and iterate through a migration to the cloud. So like I said in the last slide, training and developing your internal team is really of utmost importance. 65% of companies just don't have the people or technical knowledge on their team, right, to sort of meet their AWS objectives. And so more than 50% also know that their teams could be spending more time on things that'll be more strategic to their business. And so again, that's really why it's so important to understand the pitfalls and get ahead of them, so you're not wasting time kind of digging yourself out of mistakes that could have been avoided with some more planning up front. And then obviously, like when in doubt, that's what partners are here for. And so Lance and I talk to folks all the time, just looking for some guidance. There's no strings attached, but if you also need us to sort of pick up and do some of the heavy lifting, we're more than happy to as well. So here's some of the kind of common migration hurdles. So when you're looking at a potential cloud migration for companies really small and large, it can be fairly difficult to get executive buy-in when there isn't really a catalyst event pushing you into it. So it's easy to justify a cloud migration when your data center is closing down or when you have aging hardware and it's starting to fail. But seeing the benefits of cloud computing, especially when it comes to financial ones, can be a little bit more elusive and generally require some additional effort. So there's also a number of barriers to even kind of getting to a place where a migration can sound feasible. So timelines, performance requirements, workload complexity, legacy applications, and really having no one at the company anymore who knows how any of these things run and work. And so that's sort of why Lance is going to talk about Mission and AWS's migration approach, how we can help you kind of work through your inventory, estimate costs and timelines, validate your preparedness, and get you in a place where you feel confident to kind of support such an endeavor. I think this is Lance. You're up.
Nice. You got to say the line.
Over to you, Lance.
Nailed it. Glad you read my mind. Alrighty. Hey there, everyone. If you're still attending and listening, this is Lance again. So I'm going to talk you guys through the AWS framework and some of Mission's internal frameworks. But this is basically how we approach our projects. For a lot in the startup space, it may be moving your platform from some existing platform service provider, something like a Heroku or a DigitalOcean. And then for others, there is a kind of a lightweight component of migration. So it depends on each customer, but for a lot of the startup space, we're building new products on AWS, which is really an ideal time for us so we can kind of do it right the first time. So that whole measure twice, cut once adage. But we didn't kind of come up with this formula by ourselves. We're using primarily the frameworks specified by AWS. So they have their well-architected framework for just kind of general cloud infrastructure, as it pertains to AWS and doing things properly and best practices. But they also have a framework for migration methodologies, and they call it the Migration Acceleration Program. So it's kind of one part funding vehicle, another part framework, and it's really just intended to get companies landed properly on AWS. And when I say properly there, it's important that, it's important to AWS that through this framework or through this process, the companies that get set up on AWS, they already have their environment hardened and secured, and they're avoiding the pitfalls of accidentally opening S3 buckets and exposing data, like stuff like that. It takes that we add extra time in this process to make sure that everything is set up appropriately and secured the right way. And so a lot of this is backed by Amazon's kind of their internal roadmap or documentation for these types of workload migrations and build outs. So it's typically broken out into 3 phases. The first one is just called assess. That's where we're trying to understand the cost implications. If we were to migrate this thing to cloud or set you up on a product architecture on cloud, here's what we think it'll cost. That'll be cost to run on AWS, cost for a company like Mission to come in and build it, cost for any licenses or other things that you may need to run that system. So it's pretty much hands-off consulting type of effort where we just want to evaluate and just review your system, review your product and your application, and then do the cost analysis of running that sort of system in production on AWS, and show how that scales over time. The second one is called Mobilize. That's where we actually get to the work of provisioning infrastructure in the cloud. We're migrating data, we're establishing endpoints and connectivity and getting things actually running, getting your system up and running within AWS. And then the final phase, Migrate and Modernize, is certainly modernize us, optimize theirs, but essentially the intention is to make sure that we're leveraging all of the cloud native services where applicable, get kind of applications off of traditional compute stacks and more into managed services that increase the resilience and kind of the reliability of your overall system, leveraging those cloud tools. That's the program. We've got more slides that cover it in a little bit more depth. And then, we can also just talk in general, best practices and approaches for executing on these migrations and doing it right the first time. So this is kind of the overview slide. I'm going to actually skip past this one since I already explained it, and get more into the details. Let's go to the next one, Scott. All right. So to start with, in this assess phase, what we normally do is that cost analysis and understanding between the type of workload that you need to run and all the storage systems that we'll need to provision, everything that needs to be there. We want to just kind of figure out what it's going to cost But we also want to understand the business implications for this type of move. For some customers, they've already got a workload that they're operating in production, and they have to kind of adjust how they're, doing their financial operations and their business and technology operations. So there's more than just changing some technology. We want to make sure that everyone in the business is kind of aligned with how things are going to be running on AWS, just the nature of cloud-based systems, and that we want this to all be kind of cloud native in mind. So if you're familiar with frameworks like the 12-factor application, right, we want to make sure our software teams are aware of a lot of these concepts so that they can build reliable applications in the cloud. There is a component of this in which we will do a migration readiness assessment. It's kind of just a sit-down discussion. It'll be with somebody like Scott or myself, a solutions architect from Mission, and we review a handful of different items in just kind of your general business and technology, internal process and inner workings. But we want to meet with the stakeholders and make sure everybody's bought in on the cloud idea and help you guys kind of talk through the vision, and we can basically set pins on how we're going to get there together. So migrations are much more than just technology. There's a people component to it as well. Let's go next one, Scott. Yeah, and we typically do break it up into these two chunks, right? So one side of it is understanding the business. Where does this thing intend to go? Where do you want to take it? What sort of functionality are you envisioning that will need to be implemented down the line? And then the actual technical requirements, like what is the stack today? How do you run this thing? Is it deployed on some other cloud or another platform that will need to kind of translate into AWS, or are we making a new product line? So this is all net new, which is more the case in a lot of the startup realm. Let's go next one, Scott. One thing that we are, that we try to champion a lot is this idea of the cloud adoption framework, and that's breaking through a lot of the hesitation that some may have about running a production system on the cloud. There's still some of that mindset that you got to be in control of the hardware itself to feel comfortable operating. But there comes a change in how you just do operations in general as you're switching to the cloud. And we want to make sure that the internal teams at our customers' organizations are championing new processes and new procedures, right? Trying to stop building on more legacy infrastructure and make things more cloud native, and take advantage of a lot of the controls that these application languages and frameworks give you to build really resilient and like durable applications. They're not, if one thing breaks, it's not going to all fall over. And that kind of gets built into the application, it gets built into the infrastructure and all of the tools that come with that, right? So, and as teams are getting more into like automating their releases and their builds and their tests and whatnot, there is a need to kind of streamline in such a way that your system can account for being in a cluster. You can have an auto scaling group in place, and your compute is just like stateless and ephemeral. Your storage systems, you've got good kind of well-built and well-defined schema for the type of data that you need to pull in, ingest, and analyze, right? And there's a lot of decisions that you'll make upfront, which will impact the business down the road, depending on how things go. So we want to kind of champion this cloud adoption ideal, and get everything kind of 12-factor and streamlined as much as possible, because that's really the best way to take advantage of the cloud, right? And when it's not just another data center that you can run VMs in over there. If you really figure it out really well, you can run a workload on the cheap, right? Because you know how to kind of mix and match the different technologies, and you know exactly what sort of system that you would want to employ for a given product or workload or whatever. And that's our role to help kind of define And now, then it kind of pivots from, there's this AWS framework around the migration acceleration program and how we'll kind of execute. But then the other blend of that is just missions experience and, how we kind of handle workload building and running operations on AWS. So this comes from all the not only migrations, but the build out, like greenfield build outs and product deployments that we've just been doing over the years, right? So it's something that we've got a lot of different experience with, a lot of different tools and technologies, and can help bring that to our customers so that they can have their system be built correctly the first time, and it's in a state where you can make changes and pivot easily. Because one unfortunate reality to all of this cloud building business is that everything that we create will someday die, right? When you launch a system, like that thing is in a state of decay until it goes away. So you need to be prepared for the inevitability that that system will end. And as long as you're kind of keeping that in mind with your planning, you can be strategic and still have a system that you can quickly change bits and pieces of it around. And a lot of that is coming with things like infrastructure as code and configurations as code. The more we can codify about an environment, and the more we can automate the procedure of making changes in that environment, just the better off you will be, right? You'll be in much more control because your system operation is defined, and everything has kind of clear-cut definitions as to how it operates, and nothing will like live totally inside somebody's head, because that's where we get bogged down with like technical debt. Let's go next one, Scott. Shoot, I need to take a breather here. I just rattled off a bunch of info. So just to kind of reframe or recenter, so we're still talking through Amazon's migration acceleration program. After the assess phase, in which we are vetting the system, trying to figure out how much it'll cost and operationalize some of those details, then we go build it. There's a lot to consider here. If you skim through this bulleted list of items, these are all things that we're thinking of as we're building the system out, or thinking ahead of time to like get planned. Some of this stuff is very important, right? So how are you going to keep backups of the data? What is the strategy if there's a failure? What's the timeline in which you'd want your data to be available, and then which copy is sufficient? Like, do you need like within a minute of downtime, you need the last data set, or can it be like an hour or two? So there are all lots of controls and business requirements that will determine some of the technology implementation details here. And so stuff that may seem minor is actually kind of a big deal to do it right the first time, such as like tagging strategy. It may seem menial to assign metadata, some bit of information to all your systems running on AWS, because it's a very manual process most of the time. You got to go through and make sure that some tag is present, but it'll save you a lot down the line, one in straight up dollars, right? Because through this process you're going to be getting credits on the workload that you deploy. So when it's tagged, you're earning credits on that infrastructure, right? If we're talking EBS volumes with a bunch of terabytes of storage on them, you're getting credits if that thing is tagged properly, because you're doing this migration acceleration program. Part of it is you're getting credits on that infrastructure. So if you forget to apply your tags, that's basically money you're leaving on the table. Stuff like that. It's a minor detail, but it has a big implication. So all these things we want to sit and think through, make sure the strategy is clear, and it's doing things in what we consider to be a best practices way. It used to be back in the day that you would have one single AWS account, and you'd put your non-production and your production all in the same thing. And over time, that started to become more difficult to manage, because you'd have a bunch of people in the same place where you've got production and non-production, and you're trying to like change policies so that people can only read and write to subsets of the account. but it kind of broke down, right? So over time, what the model changed into, now you need many AWS accounts. And it used to be that you'd go connect each account to your debit card or whatever. But now AWS has this service called organizations, where you can really just post up one single account and have many sub accounts under it. And from there, you can actually drop them into their own little buckets, or like organizational units is the specific term, and apply policies to those accounts. So you can have like an account level policy. It's called a service control policy. It's really useful, right? So if you need to isolate different environments between each other, and like if you got this one is going to be hardcore secure because it's running in Europe, and we need to maintain GDPR eligibility, or whatever the case is. You have the ability to kind of like segregate all your data and systems between the people and the access layer altogether. Another kind of interesting note there is when you stand up a brand new AWS account, if you were to take some aftermarket security product and run a scan on that account, that scan would fail, and it would tell you that the account is not secured, right? So a baseline default AWS account will still need somebody to go through and set up all the security services and wire things up so that you're getting all the auditing on the APIs happening to your account, and everything's like being stored in a log somewhere, and that those logs aren't able to be tampered with, and that there's a clear pattern on where all the logs are being ingested, because there's logs on your application, your compute instances, there's logs on your databases, there's logs in like the cloud infrastructure bits that you may have deployed. There's logs for your network traffic, like VPC flow logs, just a lot of logs to have to consider. And then strategies to how you're going to review and parse the logs, and what sort of metrics are required in this environment. So let me summarize this whole thing by saying there's a lot of little things that you have to consider, and we've done this enough that we'll tell you pretty much what all this is, and how to navigate this appropriately in a place where you're better off. Thank you, Scott. Last section of map there is migrate and modernize. See, the last one said optimize. Should have said modernize. There's this concept that we refer to here as the 7 R's of implementation. This is kind of an industry standard term. You'll see this at most of the other providers. We stick to the same kind of lingo, but this is kind of a simpler version of 12-factor app. It's another way to say it, essentially. There's going to be all sorts of flavors and ways that we can run a given thing. There's not usually one right way, but there are several wrong ways to do that. So this exercise really becomes, what's the best way to get what's the right tool for the job, essentially, for each application? What's the right tool for the job? Come up with a plan, and then we'll help you implement that. So where Assess is hands-off, highly consultative, Mobilize is hands-on, mid-tier consultative, because a lot of it's just kind of like boilerplate. It's the same type of security implementation for most AWS accounts. And where it gets unique is your actual workload, your application. This Migrate and Modernize one is entirely consultative, because we have to take a component of your product architecture or your platform or whatever. It could be a big monolith, it could be a tiny little microservice, but we've got to evaluate it on the basis of what it does and find the right tool to implement it. Maybe like Lambda functions with API gateway. It may be a ECS Fargate task, or like cluster with tasks that can be kicked off, or like a batch job. There's going to be a bunch of different ways that we can deploy each thing. And like I said, there wouldn't be a right one, but there will be some wrong ones. And we'll help you kind of do that process of elimination and get the right tool implemented for that thing. Let's go next one. Optimization is big. I mean, that's kind of why we're doing this whole cloud thing. Instead of you sitting in a data center and going, all right, we're going to have a big event where we're going to need to scale up. You know, we're doing this sale before um, such and such date for this holiday, and we're expecting a few $1 million in revenue or whatever. Like you're some big clothing brand. Um, if you're in a data center, you're having to forecast your usage of bare metal machines and hardware. You have to attain that bare metal and hardware, like get it installed with latest and greatest operating system and application code or whatnot. But you've got to do that forecasting on your hardware, and when that's done, you still have that hardware. Right, with the cloud model, you can kind of trim your expenses to just only spend for what you consume. And you know, rather than having excess where you've got storage on disks that's being unused, or you know, CPU is idling low, these are all places where we can optimize that, right? So you know, not only changing the sizes of stuff, but changing how the infrastructure is running in general. A big thing, you know, a lot of customers will have a bunch of file system data. You know, they got like 2 TB of data on a file system, and by you know running on a cloud file system, you know, it runs up their bill because that's a big expensive system to have to manage. But by changing their application to you know talk to an object storage like S3 instead of a file system, they're able to host that storage in S3 on you know just buckets as a bunch of objects, way cheaper to maintain than a big file system. So, you know, this whole exercise is what's a cheaper or more efficient way to run this thing, um, you know, move or migrate data and kind of cut things over, and basically reduce that section of your bill, or trying to reduce things as much as possible here. AWS has some tools to do this. We have some tools to do it, but that's the intention there for the optimization. Thanks, Scott. I think we're wrapping up here shortly. Yeah. So after the migration, customers will normally go through it's like a post go live, what do you call it? Like a post mortem, where they go, okay, here's what went well, here's what didn't go so well. We'll kind of take stock and see what we need to do from there. That looks a bit different for every customer, but for the most part, we offer services that help get through that period. Um, you know, sometimes it may be like making adjustments to parts of the infrastructure that we've just deployed, or then it's like maintaining, right? You've deployed a product on AWS and you're scaling like crazy, and you know you're constantly building out your product, like your features and your application and whatnot, but then you're also extending your infrastructure and adding more things, you know, doing more within the workload. All that kind of change can become difficult to manage, so we offer teams of people, we offer tools, support, consulting services, whatever kind of either hands-off or hands-on support you need as it pertains to your workloads on AWS. We have a service to help you with it. Right, and so that's kind of one of those situations where if you had something in mind, you'll probably sit down on a conversation with me or Scott or another person from our team, and like an AWS account exec here at Mission. Let's go to that last one. There he is. Okay, so that is going to kind of summarize our webinar for the day. The last slide here for the closeout, or before we do the little call to action one, is the do's and don'ts of migrating, right? So that's what this thing is titled. We felt that it would be wrong to not have a final slide that said do's and don'ts of migrating. I'm having degraded quality, but to just kind of run through it real quick, right? Make sure you understand why you're going to go to the cloud in the first place, right? Don't just adopt the latest and greatest thing, like we're going to run on the cloud and run Kubernetes. Like just find the right tool for the job, and make sure that there's a good reason for doing this sort of migration or implementation or whatever. Make sure everybody's aligned and on the same page. Have a good understanding of what it's all going to cost. Follow frameworks that people have been successful using in the past, and that includes a team who has done it before, if possible. And I'm not just saying that because I work for a company that provides that team. I do mean it. I would say that in any situation, it's better to have somebody who's done it before, because they're going to go, oh no, don't do it like that. You're going to run into this, and that. It's useful to have that kind of experience or wisdom on the team. Don't try to do too much at once. Changing while you're in flight can be done. It's just stressful. It's adds complexity. It adds stress. If you're on a timeline, it is what it is. But in general, try to take reasonable chunks of work off at a time, and don't make everybody hate the cloud before they're even there. That they haven't been given a proper chance to like vet it out. They just know like that project sucked, and I don't like AWS now. Don't overthink stuff. This can happen really quickly and really easily on AWS. There's a bunch of different ways to do everything. Like if I wanted to have something that runs once a day, I could tell you 5 ways to do it on AWS. So like run this recurring task, right? You're going to have all these different ways which you can mix and match different AWS services, and they can look like these little Rube Goldberg machines. Is it Rube or Rube? Rube. These Rube Goldberg machines, they're all complex. Like, yeah, okay, so what you got to do is you got to go to the API Gateway console and find the endpoint there, and you got to add a query string, and you got to put the text string that you want to happen, and then that's going to go talk to my SQS queue and pull a job from the queue, and it can get too much, right? So like, don't overthink it. Keep it as simple as possible the whole time. Don't forget about the security. You need to bake the security into your product and not bolt it on top of it. And don't treat cost optimization as something you're going to do like later. Do that up front. Otherwise, you're leaving money on the table. How did I hit the summary, Scott? Excellent. Who's doing the special offer, me or you?
Doesn't much matter. I guess, I mean, this is the end. So thanks a lot, everybody, for coming and listening to us. Sorry, there's people mowing the lawn next door. But obviously, like, it's what Lance has been alluding to the whole time. We do these types of conversations every day. So, we want to offer a free migration readiness assessment call with someone on the SA team. We're happy to hear about, obviously, what y'all have going on, how we might be able to help, and even if we can't help you, don't need us to help, but just want some more guidance on where to get started, we're happy to do that. So you can see the URL to the site down below, and we've got a poll up that if you're interested in talking with us, if you just hit yes or no, we're happy to reach out to you accordingly. So I think that closes everything we had to talk about today. Really appreciate y'all joining us, and we'll see you soon.